Did I just almost back into the tree? Almost, but I didn't. Hello, welcome back to this channel. I'm gonna do my kind of end of the year unhaul, I guess I'm just gonna call this. I did a big unhaul last year already where I went through both of these bookshelves, or all three of these bookshelves, because this part is now hidden behind the tree, and also because I know that I really went through these books. We're not going to look at this shelf, but we're going to look at this one shelf over here and one shelf in my bedroom. I had a certain amount of shelves that was just kind of dedicated to what I'm reading right now, so like all of my new in books. So we're gonna go through those because a lot of those are not going to be in my permanent collection. So we're gonna do like a little bit of collection reorganization haul kind of deal, I guess, and then I'll show you which books I unhauled. Yeah, that's about it. Let's go. So, I was trying to go for a little bit of a Christmassy vibe here, but we have weird angles in this house because the apartment is very small. So I'm just hoping it all works out. Anyway, I unhauled some books. Most of these are recent books. Most of them are books that I've read this year that I have decided, yeah, they're not going into my permanent collection of books because that's kind of how I see them. I don't want to keep any book that I've ever read. I want to really keep books that I feel like the stories touched me in some way that I need to collect them, to keep them here, to have physical copies, to look up stuff in them. So let's start off with the pile in front of me, and this is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I really enjoyed this book this year. It was really, this is more like a crime kind of a thing. We have an unreliable narrator, and I really love unreliable narrators. They're so much fun. But basically this woman sees outside her window that in her neighbor's house somebody gets killed, and then she calls the cops, and it's this whole big thing, and then the cops are like, well, are you really sure somebody got killed, or are you just having some issues, basically. I really like this book. It was really fun to read, but I don't think I'm ever going to reread it because I know the twists now, and I feel like with crime going into the new year, I probably have to start using the audiobooks instead of actually buying the physical books, because actually none of the crime reads that I had this year, any kinds of thrillers, I don't think I'll ever read them again. I really enjoyed them, but I just don't want to read them again. So I feel like I should be focusing on audiobooks for that type of book, just to make sure that I'm not consuming too much. So let's stay on topic. Then I have The Maidens, which is also like a crime thriller kind of a thing, and it has a very dark academia vibe because this all happens in Cambridge. I don't know, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a fun read. You can definitely go look up my review. It's basically about someone who recently lost her husband, and then at campus where her niece studies, there are suddenly some kinds of murders, and she tries to go there and help them figure it out, although I thought it was really weird because she's a psychologist. She hadn't done anything like that before, and then she goes to campus and tries to figure out who the murderer is. It's kind of like, are you a beginner detective now or what? It just kind of seemed weird to me, and the twist was one of those twists where it was like, what's the weirdest thing that could possibly happen? Let me write that. So once again, I don't think I'll be rereading this, but it was certainly fun when I read it. I had so much fun reading it, so yeah. It's just not meant to be in the collection. Sticking to the topic of crime reads, we once again have 56 Days. This was my first book in the actual COVID-19 pandemic, which was actually kind of cool because it was really nice to see the feelings that I could relate to, yeah, that had to do with the pandemic in a book, which was kind of fun. And this is about someone meeting someone else. So they're a couple, they meet right before the pandemic, and then they decide to go into lockdown together. But at the end of lockdown, one of them is dead, and the question is, how do you get there? Why is one of them dead? What are their histories, and so forth? The story was kind of okay. I mean, it was entertaining, definitely, but it wasn't like a crime masterpiece. I really enjoyed like The Woman in the Window way more than I enjoyed this. It's fun because it was, especially because it was in the pandemic, so I really did read it in a day or something. But yeah, once again, just not going to be part of the permanent collection. Next on my little pile over here is Hunter Biden's memoir, Beautiful Things. I don't rate memoirs on this channel because I don't want to like rate someone's history or someone's life story. I just don't think that that is correct. And so Hunter Biden in this story talks about his family, a bit about his childhood and his relationship to his brother, his mother, and his father. And he also talks a lot about his drug addiction, what that was like, and how he eventually overcame it and what his family dynamics are like today. And I really liked the story. It was really interesting because I am kind of interested in the Biden family, or at least I like the president, and so it was very interesting to, yeah, I don't know, I guess see some more information about him. There are some other memoirs that I've read where I've been like, holy shit, I really needed to read this in order to broaden my mind and my horizon, and I just didn't feel that way about this, so that's why it's not going into my permanent collection. But my mom, for example, she loved this book. She absolutely loved it. So everyone has different ways of seeing things. So I'm absolutely not trying to disrespect anyone's opinion if I say I'm unhauling this. It's just kind of the way I feel about books. But that is so deeply personal that, yeah, I could just tell you what I'm thinking. Continuing on, I have No One Is Talking About This, which was also a shortlisted book for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2021, and I wanted to read some more of the books that were actually on that list because I think it's a good way to get out of your comfort zone and out of your bubble, to just look at all kinds of short and long lists and just see, hey, what's on there? Would I usually read this? Let me check it out. And this was one of those books, and this was definitely out of my comfort zone. This was a very interesting book. It was written in a really interesting style. So it's basically about a person who mostly works online, I would say. So she somehow has this way of earning money online, which is called the portal in this book. And then there's like this sudden tragic life event that occurs. Her life changes because of it. And so, yeah, all kinds of things happen, and it kind of talks about how it disrupts her life. I didn't necessarily like the way this was written. I think it was a super interesting style, and it was the first time that I saw the internet and all of its intricacies depicted well in a book, but I just didn't like the style as much. So that's why I'm unhauling it. That's all there's to say to that. So another book I have over here is The Death of Vivek Ogee. I really, really like this book. This is about Vivek Ogee, and this person kind of goes through a transformation in the book, and it's kind of described how everyone around this person reacts to his transformation and what it's like. There are some aspects of the book that I don't like. I'm just gonna say it that way. I just think it was too short. Honestly, I think it was too short. I wish we would have known more about Vivek and the way he felt and what he was going through and what was going on through his mind in this whole story. I thought that would have made this book really, really perfect. And the way it is right now, I don't want to reread it because it's like there's still that something missing that I really would like to know about Vivek. And so, yeah, I'm not going to reread it. That's just the way it is. But I still recommend it if you can find a copy anywhere. It's still a really good book and still a really interesting book, so go check it out. But yeah, it was just too short in my opinion. Sorry about the sudden lighting change. It was just getting a little too dark in here, and I knew that would be really difficult to grade later. Let's keep going on with my pile over here. The next book here is The Other Black Girl. And so I went in with this book. I guess the expectations I have weren't necessarily realistic expectations. I loved the idea of this book. So this was about Nella, is the name of the main character, and she works at this office, she works in a publishing house, and all of a sudden she starts getting these notes that say like, leave the publishing house now, stop working here, whatever. And this kind of coincides with the time when another black girl, the second black person, starts working at this publishing house. So she's kind of assuming, well, maybe it is this other black girl, what is she doing, why is this happening? And what I loved in this book was that there was so much description of black culture, and I just absolutely loved that. There was so much to learn there, such a deep dive on like black hair and music and culture in general. And I think if the book would have like stuck to some office drama and that, I would have just absolutely loved it, because it would have just been such a deep dive into the whole thing. But It didn't. There were some elements of the story that were like, it's really hard to explain without getting into plotline without saying any spoilers because it's kind of complicated, but it was very, very slow for the longest time, and then at the end it was like an explosion of information that wasn't really explained very well, and so at the end I was kind of like, huh? It just didn't wrap up well for me, so for me, not a part of the collection, but still I got to learn so many things about Black culture in this, and that was a lot of fun. Another book over here is What Comes After, and this was a book about, I guess, 3 teenagers. So 2 best friends, one of them gets killed by the other, and the other then kills himself because he feels bad for it, and then after their bodies are found and that whole thing has happened, this pregnant girl shows up at the doorstep of one of the fathers. And so this book is about like loss, letting go, I don't know, going forward in life. The author of this book, she works in a courthouse and she helps people move on from certain cases and move on from trauma and horrible crimes. You really could see that in the story. Like, that element was so well represented and well written in the story, but in and of itself it just wasn't anything where I'd say I want to read this again. It was a great book to read, and there were certain things about loss that I learned, but yeah, it's just not doesn't need to have a permanent home here. I think someone else may profit from this book more than I did. Next book over here is Where the Dead Sit Talking. This was a book by an Indigenous author. That's kind of why I picked it, because I try to have like one Indigenous read a month. That's kind of like what I'm aiming for. I don't always do it because sometimes I forget to look for it or buy it, or I have so many unread books at home where I'm like, shit, I need to read those first. However, this was one of those, and I can't say anything else that I just DNF'd it. I didn't like the writing style, and there were some like fantasies of a teenage boy in there, and that's just not my thing. Some of the things were just weird, and it's like, I just don't want to read that in my free time. But a lot of other people really, really love this book. It was a finalist in the National Book Award, so a lot of people really did love this, so that's really just my personal thing. Then I have a German book here called Komplett Gänsehaut. I didn't get the point of this. Like, this was like one big rant. If you read this, I don't get what she was trying to say. You know what I mean? I think this was supposed to be like a social commentary thing, and I thought it was really funny at first. Like, the first few pages had me cracking up because she does have a really good eye for like nailing certain characters of a generation and just nailing hypocrisies or things that are just kind of like unreasonable, and I absolutely loved that. But it's like, I don't get what the whole thing is about. So I read like 3/4 of it, and I just didn't, it was like, what are you trying to tell me? So yeah, someone else might find more joy in it. Another book over here is Malibu Rising by one of my by now favorite authors because of Evelyn Hugo. That was just a book that I just loved it so much. So of course I picked Malibu Rising as my book of the month in that month, and I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was really great. It was a wonderful exploration of siblings, sibling dynamics, what they can be like, and what everything. I don't think I'm gonna read it again. I took it off the shelf for the reorganization for this Unhaul. I just took it out and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna read it ever again. And I don't think there's anything in there that I want to ever look up, so it's gone. Another book here is The Only Good Indians. This was kind of an experiment for me, also one of the Indigenous books, but just a bit of an experiment because this is horror, and I've never read horror before. I'm not a big fan of horror movies, not really my thing, and I found out with this book, horror is just not my genre, and that's totally okay. I think if you like horror, I think this would be a really fun book because I love the way that it works in like spirits and belief in generations and in passing on, and not the karma of the world, but like the dynamics of the world. And I really like that about this book, but horror is not my genre. I didn't enjoy it. I read almost the whole thing, and I was like, okay, it was an experiment, and it failed. That's okay. So I have one other German book here, and that is Pocket Hazel's Money Guide. Pocket Hazel is a German YouTuber actually, and she studied something with money, so she studied like tax law in Germany, and I thought maybe there was something I could learn from this book, but I think it's for younger audiences than me. I'm in my late 20s and thinking about like should I buy a house or not? Do I need to invest money, and how will I not you know, died poor as an old person. And this is kind of directed towards teenagers or people in their early 20s that are just figuring out how to work with their money or how to budget and how to do all that. I'm not the correct demographic for that. So I think I will put this in one of those bookshelves, you know, one of those public bookshelves where someone can find it. And I think that's the perfect place for it because someone will find it. The last book over here is Home Before Dark, which was one of my Halloween reads, and I think I'm going to keep doing this every year to have like 1 or 2 Halloween reads because this was so much fun. I had so much fun reading this in like the Halloween phase because I finally decorated in early October and had all of the Halloween decoration up for the whole month of October. So it was so much fun and I really enjoyed it to have like a Halloween themed month. However, I don't think I'm going to be rereading this book. It's just as simple as that because, I don't know, I know the twist. I love the haunted house vibes, there you go, of this book. So if you have any recommendations for other haunted house books, please leave them in the comments and then I can write them down for next year for my TBR for the next Halloween season. But yeah, I just don't think I'm going to read this. But those are the books that I unhauled. Yeah, like I said, this was more of a recent read unhaul. If you want to see my unhaul where I unhauled like my whole book collection up here and have a look into that. There were, yeah, some books that were just ages old that I needed to get rid of, and these were kind of like what I read this year and what I just don't think needs to go into my permanent collection kind of unhaul. I hope you had fun. I have a little more space in my little current read shelf, so that's something, I guess. My poor boyfriend just keeps complaining that, I don't know, I have way too many books here. And it's true. It's like, he's not lying. I just have way too many books. But that's all of our pain, isn't it? That's just the way it is. I hope you have great holidays wherever they may be, and I hope you have a great start into 2022. Hopefully a year that'll be a little nicer to us than the past two. We'll see. I'll catch you soon. Bye. I love the haunted house. I love the haunted house. This is gonna be a difficult one. This is gonna... Oh shit. Oh shit. Can I do it?